Welcome back to the Dormant Politics Podcast. My name is Justin Fisher.
My name is Nolan Flaherty.
And I'm Austin Vertine.
So we saw President Donald Trump that met with President Vladimir Putin of Russia in Helsinki, Finland. It's one of the most historic summits that we've seen to date. And there were some very big takeaways from this. So in the summit between President Putin and President Donald Trump, we actually saw President Donald Trump turn on America, side with Russia over Vladimir Putin's opinion on meddling in the 2016 election, and say that Russia was correct and our American intelligence agencies were wrong. So there's been a couple different takes on this. I'm pretty sure people that are very far right, that I don't even want to say far right, people that are very pro-Trump are kind of in favor of this. We saw Tucker Carlson was in favor of this. I think Sean Hannity was also in favor of this. But then we see people more on the left, like Stephen Colbert, that are immediately going to treason. So I kind of want to see your guys' take. Are we somewhere in the middle, or do we think this was good, or do we think this was treason?
Well, I think right away we saw the next day Trump kind of backtrack and say, well, look, I didn't mean to call on intelligence agencies. He mentioned that he has full faith in what the United States intelligence agencies are doing, although which I don't really believe that either, as he's been calling out the FBI and stuff like that time after time. But I wouldn't necessarily call it treason. I just say that Trump doesn't want to be pushed around, and he doesn't want to see Russia as the main infiltrator in this whole election cycle. He wants to keep all the power. He wants to say, I won this election fairly, and he doesn't want anyone else to take that away from him.
Yeah, I think that, I think when going back to your point about like the political spectrum, I feel like the political spectrum on this issue of Russia and Trump, it's almost done a complete 180. About 8 years ago, the 2008 election, right? It was Barack Obama was talking about how having better relations with Russia would be a beneficial thing, and I think we all believe that, is that we want a relationship with Russia that's not as contentious as it was in the 20th century. And you heard from John McCain in 2008. He was talking about more aggressive policy toward Russia. Even Mitt Romney.
Yeah,
Mitt Romney in 2012 said that Russia was the biggest enemy.
It was Russia.
Right? And now we see that the political right in this country is they have flipped in a little.
I don't want to say the right. I want to say the strong supporters of Donald Trump.
Yeah.
What do you think?
The base of Trump, which is coincide with,
which is weird.
It's the base of the Republican Party.
If you think about it in like 2012, do you remember when Mitt Romney said our biggest enemy was Russia? Which, I mean, looking back, wasn't that horrible of an answer. It's not that horrible of an answer to say Russia's our biggest geopolitical enemy. And then Barack Obama said, Mitt, we want 1980s call. They want their foreign policy back. And it was like,
what a comeback.
I don't know. It was like, if you look back at that, it wasn't that bad of a comment for Mitt Romney to make. And we just see a complete 180.
Yeah, just
4 years later.
From you being a Republican and obviously having your strong beliefs on the right, what do you think is the reason for that? Is it because of this sort of backpedaling that the Republican Party has to sort of like defend Russia almost because of this whole scandal? What do you think is the reason that
I think we see a lot of Republicans today that are almost feel the need, like Mitt Romney said, or not Mitt Romney, Paul Ryan said he doesn't want, the Speaker of the House currently, doesn't want to criticize the president while he's overseas. I mean, which is fair, but I think we can criticize the president for what he said, right? I think us, the right in America, if Barack Obama had said, Russia, you're correct, our 17 American intelligence agencies, who all have a unanimous decision that Russia had meddled in our elections, are wrong, the right would have gone nuts. Sean Hannity would be screaming on his television show that Barack Obama is a treasonous traitor, right? So I think Donald Trump has to be criticized by both the left and the right for what he said. But I think that this situation has to be analyzed. So what I kind of notice with Donald Trump is that, like, he says a lot. Like, he says a lot of things. And they don't necessarily manifest into policy. So what we see with Donald Trump is that when he goes over to Russia and he says all this stupid stuff, It's not going to manifest into less aggression on Russia, I don't think. I think it's just Donald Trump saying stupid stuff. But we have to recognize that two things could be true at once. That the 17 American intelligence agencies, that all 17 American intelligence agencies that said Russia is meddling in the 2016 election, that's true. And at the same time, Donald Trump did not collude with Russia. Those two things can be true at once. I think when Donald Trump disagrees with the American intelligence agencies and says that Russia actually didn't meddle in the election, it has nothing to do with a conspiracy of where Donald Trump is colluding with Russia. It has to do with he's a huge ego and he does not want his election win of 304 electoral votes being compromised. I think it's because he wants the American people in the world to think that he won the election fair and square.
Yeah, I look at the Russia issue almost the same way I look at free trade in this last election, right? Because you see that I think that many Republican voters were hearing many of these same talking points like 20 years before Trump, where free trade is a beneficial thing for everyone, right? And that Russia is somebody to not really trust, right? And I feel like it was something that many of these voters didn't necessarily agree with. I felt like there was I feel like there's a couple things going on here. There was the part that they don't really agree with that. I think they have a little more populist sentiment to them. And I also think there's almost like a George W. Bush effect to this. Hear me out here. I think that George W. Bush's foreign policy, and I think after we're a decade past his presidency and a decade in self-reflection as a country toward that, and I think that many people on the right who were maybe supportive of the Iraq War and many of George Bush's Middle East interventions, I think that they came to the conclusion that this is not beneficial for our country. And that I think that this almost coincides with that. So I think that there's a George W. Bush effect to the change in opinion on Russia on the right. And I also think that it was just from years of the same talking points from Republican politicians that they didn't necessarily agree with, but they agreed with other talking points for abortion, for taxes, for things like that.
Yeah.
The aggression towards Russia has sort of dimmed down over the years, and we've seen that. But I think there's something to mention, or to bring up, rather, when you mention that there's been no collusion directly with Donald Trump, but we've seen that some of his aides and associates have sort of been indicted already. Michael Flynn was indicted. George Papadopoulos, Paul Manafort, Richard Gates.
Paul Manafort is probably the biggest one.
Yeah, definitely the biggest one, but we know that there's a lot of gray area, and I mean, it's what the news has been talking about.
We saw a lot of indictments over
the news has been talking about it for months, and that's because
Mueller's
there's so much Mueller's investigation, and there's so much gray area going on, and that's why it's continuing to be a story. We don't know exactly what's the connection between Trump and any of these people at all, if any. So there's just so much gray area within Russia, and that I think we want to see that the Republican Party wants to trust Russia even more and build a strong relationship so that there's a clarity among the American people that we can trust Russia.
I think, I don't know, with this Helsinki summit, I mean, when was Brett Kavanaugh nominated? Was it like 8 or 9 days ago? Like a little over a week ago? We're not hearing any of that. Like the election cycle is moving so fast, at like light speed. It did a 180 flip, and Brett Kavanaugh isn't even in the election, or it isn't even in the news now. But I think the Democrats. Why did I just say Dems? Am I Trump's Twitter? Not Jesus.
The libs.
The
Democrats
eating liberal.
The Democrats are pushing so hard this Russia collusion, this Robert Mueller investigation, because I think in the fall it might garner them votes. I don't necessarily even think.
You believe that? I don't believe that at all.
I don't
know if it's true. I think that's what they're attempting.
I think this is not something you build a campaign around. It's something to build back to gain the House and Senate.
But at the same time, what do the Dems have to reach for at this point? I mean, their whole party is sort of starting to break away. Like the Hillary Clinton type Democrats.
I don't know.
I think
that no power. And then,
so I think that what we need to do for the Democratic Party, and again, I'm not a Democrat, but if I were to have a political party, I would want the Democratic Party to represent my values, right? And they do it in a certain way, on a few issues, but not enough.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think that we need a grassroots movement similar to the Tea Party, but without the racism and stupid logic.
So you want
know what I'm
you want a
saying?
grassroots movement of democratic socialism.
Yeah.
Well,
Absolutely.
we did see that. We saw
Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and I think that's just the
rewind.
beginning of that movement.
Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Huge upset, by the way. So far, probably the biggest upset in 2018 in these midterms. So Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, she was running for representative, I don't know which district in New York. It represents like the Bronx. It was Joe Crowley's district. Joe Crowley, however you pronounce his name.
Mm-hmm.
He was pretty much second in command in the House of Representatives. He was probably going to be Speaker of the House after Nancy Pelosi if the Dems won a majority. So definitely a huge upset. But Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is so stupid.
I think you can disagree with her policy all you want, but I think the only way to see it is a positive, because it's somebody that's coming in with new ideas and new energy.
Stupid ideas. Beyond stupid ideas.
All right, look beyond your partisan, blinders. Okay, think about this for a second. Okay, somebody who's coming in with fresh new ideas, that's not fueled by corporate money, right? Is now taking somebody over who is a huge part of the Democratic establishment, right? That has consistently failed.
I don't really care if she beat Joe Crowley.
It matters that she beat Joe Crowley. Because it's a figure who has consistently failed on the biggest stage for the last 12 years, this Democratic establishment, which has not been able to build momentum on many issues where the majority of American people are on our side.
Yeah, and the reason that people like Crowley fail is because they become pawns of the Democratic Party, and they sort of lose their values. And I like what you're saying a little bit about Ocasio, in that she's someone that's rooted in her own values. So she really ran on a platform that was her values and not directly towards the Democratic Party, even though she still ran under a Democratic party name.
It's the exact same with Bernie Sanders in 2016. And I think it's going back to my original point about Russia. And this is where I have the biggest problem with the so-called resistance, right? Is that they focus too much on this Russia scandal, while many people, I think, are tuned out against it. And I think that they want to hear issues, and we want to get back to economics economics and social issues that help working class families. And I think that's what's most important to them. And I think that when you look at the resistance, I think that many of the people they embrace, especially on this Russia scandal, is incredibly dangerous to the Democratic Party.